Who knows what the word subdivision means? Anybody not know subdivision? It's kind of just music terminology. All right, it basically refers to, you've got a measure, and as a drummer, the measure is divided into pulses, which the rest of the world calls quarter notes, right? So like, there's my measure, okay? And as I'm playing that, I've divided my measure into 4 quarter notes. If I choose to take each of those pulses and fill them up with other notes, like eighth notes, I've just subdivided, right? So I took my measure, divided it into quarter notes, took my quarter notes and divided them into eighth notes. And I can subdivide eighth notes, or 16th notes, or triplets, right? I can change that subdivision however I want to. Okay, so most of the time, it's really helpful to be subdividing in your mind more than you're actually playing. So if I'm playing eighth notes, in my head I'm still thinking 16th notes. I'm still hearing 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and right? I'm keeping that vibe going the whole time. Helps me to keep all my eighth notes in line, get a more consistent tempo, the more finely you subdivide, right? If I'm playing a swung 16th note, for example, okay, that means I'm subdividing in 16th note triplets, right, instead of normal straight 16th notes. But none of that stuff is necessarily happening to the audience. If I'm just playing eighth notes, you guys are probably, as a listener, subdividing internally in eighth notes, okay? So now I'm spelling out a difference here between externally subdividing and internally subdividing. Externally subdividing is what I'm playing. And if I'm doing this, okay, and now I'm externally subdividing in those 16th note triplets that I was talking about. You guys can all hear it. You guys are all on board. I'm letting you in on how I'm thinking, right? But when I'm just doing this, I'm not letting you in on it, and you're probably not letting yourself in on it either. Because as a listener, there's a lot of passive, you're just trying to make sense of what I'm doing, as opposed to anticipating where I'm going as much as I am, right? So what I'm externally subdividing and what I'm internally subdividing is the difference. All right, now here's the perspective shift that I want you to make as a player, all right? If I'm internally subdividing in 16th note triplets, but I'm only externally subdividing in eighth notes, then the idea of playing a 16th note triplet fill, to me, seems like the logical next step, because I'm already thinking that. I'm already sitting here thinking, right? So I'm playing this groove, and then I go, right? And that's assaulting to someone who hasn't been thinking internally that same way, right? That groove doesn't, that fill doesn't make sense if you haven't been internally subdividing in the 16th notes, in the 16th triplets the whole time. Does that make sense? You guys with me? Right? So that's a perspective difference. So I want to make sure that as I'm playing, I'm keeping in mind, what have I let the listener in on so far? Have I clued them into this yet? Do they know 16th triplets the way I know them right now? Or have I only let them in on the eighth notes? At which point, makes a lot more sense, okay? Case in point, I used to play at Eaglebrook Church a lot. I still do sometimes, but I used to play there every Sunday, probably 5 years ago. And they have services on Saturday night, and services on Sunday morning. And they have a lot of high-tech video equipment, and they record the services on Saturday nights. We would rehearse on Saturday afternoon, and then play the services, and then Sunday morning we'd come back, and instead of rehearsing again, we would all sit in the congregation and watch the recording of us playing the service the night before. Just as kind of a refresher, you know, everybody has time to wake up and watch yourself do what you did. And here I am, like, listening from the audience now. I'm not playing. And I'm thinking to myself in the recording, like, oh, here comes that awesome one. Here comes that fill that I played during the offertory. I can't wait, right? And then it happens, and I'm like, that was not as awesome as I was hoping, right? And I'm suddenly face to face with the reality that, why did I think that was going to be awesome? It was because when I played it yesterday, sitting right here, it was awesome, right? I'm not going to take that away. I'm not going to say that it wasn't awesome to me at the moment. Sure was. Nobody else got in on that, though, right? I am just speaking into the air. See what I'm saying? Nobody else got to appreciate that on the level that I appreciated it. Instead, it was a bummer. Phil was a bummer. Not even just not awesome, a bummer. Not even neutral. So here comes the Phil that I was a little bored with, actually. The Phil that I inadvertently, in the moment, played really sparsely, right? Because I intended to do more notes and I kind of froze or something. And I hear the Phil, and it actually felt great. It felt great for there to be so much room. Which, sitting in this chair, feels like that moment when you're speaking in front of a bunch of people and you pause. It's kind of a pregnant pause. And as the speaker, it feels like forever. But as you're listening, it's a very effective thing. Right? That pause really works to serve what you're saying. And I'm sitting there kind of going, dang it. The Phil that I thought was going to be awesome wasn't. The Phil that I thought was a bummer was awesome. Now what, right? Back to the drawing board, I guess. And that's what started me down this path of realizing that this perspective isn't trustworthy, right? Okay, so that's an example of you empowering your mind, right? And that example, I suppose, calls into question the ear's advice. Maybe, right? The ear says, 16th note triplets. And you're like, nope. I don't believe you. I don't think I should do that. I'm not gonna, right? Okay, another thing would be maybe as far as the habit goes, just questioning your default assumptions about how the drum set is played, right? Like, do you need to use the hi-hat when you play a groove? If I ask one of my 7th grade students, they're like fresh to it, you know, they're like, yeah, you need to use the hi-hat, when really you don't. Really, you don't need to use the snare drum. Sometimes do you guys know Stefan Van Worst? He put out a record a few years ago of his own stuff. We're doing one of his songs at my church this weekend, Instruments of Peace. And the drum part for the majority of that song is this. Right? I mean, there's some other stuff going on from the guitars and everyone so that the whole together feels nice. But that right there is not allowed. I'm not even going to say that it's boring. It's almost not allowed in a lot of drummers' minds. I got to have the hats going. I got to have like my splash cymbal involved. Right? Right? It's like, no, just, here you go. This is really feeling great, actually, in that context. Okay? So you're questioning assumptions that you have and just trying to derive or trying to figure out what they derive from. Like where's this assumption? How did this assumption get in my head? How did it become a habit? Right? Playing a crash cymbal at the end of a fill. You have to do that? You don't have to. There's many instances where it really helps. But it's not you don't play a crash cymbal at the end of your fill because you play crash cymbals at the end of fills. Right? You do it because it helps. Like, wham, that really helped to have that there. And then in other instances, it helps to not have it. I'm sure some of you have heard me say this before. There's the Wallflowers record, Bringing Down the Horse. Anybody know that? That one song, One Headlight, was a single of theirs in the late 90s. The drummer on that record is a studio drummer, not the Wallflowers normal drummer, is a studio drummer named Matt Chamberlain that I really like. Yeah, the guy plays with a lot of people, really, really amazing musician. One headlight, song, whole song, no crashes. No crash cymbals for the whole song. Not even the ride, he's just in the hats the whole way. You get done listening to that track and you don't know that he didn't hit the crash cymbal. You're not missing anything, right? Because as a musician who understands my habits don't drive me, my mind drives me, right? He is evaluating the situation and saying, I don't need a crash cymbal right now. The crash cymbal doesn't help. Here comes another opportunity. I still don't need it, right? Turns out the whole song is done. No crashes. I found that again on Johnny Lang's record from a few years ago. Michael Bland played drums on that. And track 11 or 12 or something like that. No crashes. And I didn't know until like 4 or 5 listens later. And that makes me just like, I want to pump my fist in the air for Michael Bland. And just say, dude, way to play music. Way to play music and not just drums. Right? You hear me there? That's what I'm talking about. Your habits as a drummer, the things that make drumming what it is. There's the drummer community, and then there's the music world. And they're not the same. The drummer community is like, you should have a woodblock and a cowbell. Seriously, and a double kick pedal, right? I've got nothing against those things, but they have applications. There's context.